I was thinking about what I should talk about, and obviously there's so much to say about leadership. There is so many different aspects to leadership. My entry point to this kind of conversation tonight is actually really starts with me and where I'm coming from and what I observe in my work. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm in private practice here in Perth, in Fremantle, and I'm working in the area of public health now for more than 20 years. I've been working in Germany, where I come from, as you probably all can hear, working in Germany as a psychologist, working a lot with families, working a lot with also in contexts which are quite complex, where the Department of Child Protection is involved. I've been working with groups. I did parent coaching, facilitating workshops for the last 12 years in a method called family constellation work, and I'm in private practice for the last 7 years here in Perth, the last 8 years to be exact. And I've seen over the last 20 years, I haven't counted, but I must have seen thousands and thousands of people, and I must been talked to people in about 10,000s and 10,000s of hours of therapy, different contexts. And one thing became clear to me in all these years. What came clear to me is everybody is good. There is no such thing as a bad person. There are people who behave bad, there are people who are struggling, who are people who are lashing out, who are people who are behave irresponsible. But when you talk to these people, and when you come to know them, and when you come to know their story, what you start to recognize is that deep, deep, deep inside, they're all good. And they all want to be good. And so, I was asked to give some quotes for this meeting tonight. And one of the quotes I sent in was this one. And what I found out, which is another thing apart from, or my observation, better to say, because in the end of the day, I really do not know. I can just share my observations with you. The other thing what I found out is that we're all the same. We look very different on the surface. We speak different languages, we have different skin color, we have different likes and dislikes. But in the end, we are so similar. And you can look around, and you can look at all these similar people, and we are all the same. And I think that recognition that we are all the same and that we are all good is a very, 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 very important aspect of the leadership of the future. And when we look around in our culture, what we see is interestingly something very different. Because what our culture tells us is that each one of you is special. And it's that specialness which is fed. And it's that specialness which shays. And the current cultural paradigm, the current cultural narrative feeds that. Wants you to be special, have a tattoo, have a super job, earn lots of money, have this car, have that car, have a girlfriend, have a boyfriend, have 3, have 4 boyfriends, girlfriends. Be different, be special. And what is happening, and I need to grab my notes here, which look like this. What the culture tells us we need to be special, and it endorses specialness. And what happens is that this specialness drives a wedge between us, because we start to compete. We try to be better than the other. We want to have the job this person has. We want to have the money that person has. We want to have the girlfriend or the boyfriend. We want to have a beautiful boyfriend or girlfriend. And it's all conditioned, it's all learned. And it starts when we are born into this culture. And we are told that we are special. And obviously we are special, so it's a little bit of a paradox. Each one of us is special. We're not special in the way our culture tells us. We are special. So, why is it so important to be special? It's important to be special because there is an underlying feeling. And that feeling, that idea, is not a conscious idea, which is another observation I make in my work. That most of us in our culture, they live from a paradigm or from an idea of scarcity. And so there is not enough. So I have to try hard, I have to be special to get what I need. So there is a hunger, and there is a need. We try to meet, and we try to achieve that. So we compete with others. And in that we often try to point out how special we are. But underneath there is this hunger, there is this scarcity. So whatever we get, it's somehow not enough. There always needs to be something else. And obviously, it's not always like that you get what you need and that you get what you want. So sometimes you feel down, sometimes you feel sad, sometimes you feel inadequate, sometimes you feel incomplete. And what happens then? You start to compensate. And what we're compensating with is exactly that, what that cultural narrative tells you what makes you special. Have this, have that, go here, go there. You go on the social networks, you try to pretend to be special. Look at me, I'm great. Look at my friends and me, we have such an exciting time. But underneath, there is this nagging feeling of scarcity. And you can check it within yourself as you're sitting here at the moment. Something is missing. Do you know what I mean? And so, obviously, because you can't often have it, then you try to compensate for that. And you compensate for that in many, many ways. We compensate for that. We use substances, we use certain behaviors we use our relationships, we use Facebook, we use computers. All of these things we use to compensate. And what happens is, we get addicted. So we end up with that hole in ourself, which comes from this deep underlying feeling that we are not enough, and that something is missing. We try to keep that secret to ourselves because we don't want anybody else to see it. And then we have to compensate for it because from time to time we're feeling it's not enough. And in that we create a dependency. And it's that dependency which drives the whole culture. And this is the situation we are in at the moment. On a cultural level, on a global level, consumerism is what we do. Consumerism is how we try to compensate for that lack of inner scarcity, for that feeling of scarcity we feel inside ourselves. And in our culture, everything is organized in the way that consuming becomes very, very, very easy. So we are set up. It's set up for us. I mean, I don't have my phone in my pocket, but I could get it out and I would just press the button. It's all there. You can buy it. You can have it now. You can pay now. You can pay now. You can play now and pay later on your credit card. Yeah. So in the old paradigm, what I call the old paradigm, which is, in my opinion, it's a dying paradigm. We see it everywhere. And we see it's gasping for life. And we see also it's not working. We see, Chris mentioned it, we look to America, we look to Turkey, we look to France, we look to Germany, and we see where the paradigm is not working. So, in the old paradigm, as a leader, you can use the system to get what you need. But as you said, it's all built on specialness. The good news is we need a lot of leaders. Lots. Because it's huge what we have to do. What I believe, to save the planet, to save humankind, to move somewhere which makes sense in the future. And the question is, how would a new paradigm need to look like so that we eventually the world would start to change. Our environment would start to change. Our relationships would start to change. The way how people communicate with each other would start to change. I would like to invite you into a little exercise, just a very tiny exercise. And you can close your eyes if you want, but you don't have to. I want you to imagine for a moment a world where you know that you're good. You know with all certainty that you're good. And everybody else is equally good. And we are all equal. There's nothing to prove. You're good. The others are good. There's nothing to get. What would you do? I'm not sure what you would do, but what I would do, I would start to give. Because I have something to give. And each one of you has something to give. You have something priceless to give. And it's connected to that goodness which sits deep inside. And on top of that sits a false belief of your own scarcity, which you then have to hide because you don't want anybody to see that that's how it really is. Secretly or not, you have to compensate for it because it tortures you. But on the outside, you are great. Everything is great. Everything is so exciting. I saw someone today. I haven't seen this guy for a while. I asked him what happened. He said, my work colleague, she killed herself. She was 22. Nobody knew. Everybody is happy, everybody is excited. She went to a party and she went home and hung herself. So, eventually, so now how I'm going to continue here from here. So, a person's greatness is which makes him or her equal to others. And here's the link to leadership. And here's the link, what I believe, to a leadership in a new paradigm. That the real greatness is that what makes you equal to others. We are all good. You are good. You are good. You are good. We are all good. So now one important question remains. How are we going to turn this all around? And so now we need to employ another thought. We need to understand how do actually complex living organisms, systems, organizations, businesses, institutions, how do they actually work? And so what I'm suggesting is a very organismic approach to this. So we have this idea, yeah? Everyone is equal. And that is what really makes you great. So you can look around in your life and you can see where you, in your life, you look at people, and where you look at people and you do not see them as equal. Actually, I think I know the trick. I would like to talk about a little bit more about the scarcity, and I will come to this question of yours at a moment. Yeah? Where does the scarcity actually come from? Because this is very, very important to understand. Where does it come from that we do not feel enough? It comes obviously through the inner images and through the inner setup we carry around with us. It comes through the beliefs we hold. And where do these beliefs come from? They come from our parents, they come from our education, they come from our society, they come from our culture. So here you see there is a link where the personal is connected to something bigger, which is the context. And it's from that context, from that outer context, which was once a context in which you lived and you were raised, which you internalized, and these kind of internal context you carry around with you, which is your images about your father, the images about your mother, about the things which happened to you, the different events which took place in your life, and all this inner imagery, which goes back to the first day of your life, although you do not consciously remember it. All of these inner images, they create an inner context. And we could say these inner images, they create an inner system, an inner ecosystem. And so now I'm coming to the question you ask, yeah? How do actually complex living systems, like we are all complex living systems, how are they organized? How do complex living systems, like me and you and you and you and you, how they are organized in bigger systems, like families, when everybody's equal and everything is the same? What are the principles which organize this kind of complexity? And so what we have found, that there are a few simple principles which we all have to agree to. And in a way we cannot change these principles, because they are not man-made principles. They are the principles which make man. And these principles are systemic principles. And systemic principles are principles which are describing the way how complex living systems interact, how they grow, how they ensure survival, how they thrive, but also under which circumstances they implode or they die. So the first principle, there is a meta principle which I have to explain, or which I have to talk about first. The meta principle is that everything, what is, needs to be honored. We know from mindfulness or from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a great modality and quite in fashion at the moment, that at the beginning of every change process sits acceptance. Before you haven't accepted something, you can't change it. And in a way that first meta principle, which is not this one, I'm going to talk about it in a moment, points to that. Everything, what is, needs to be honored. So now we're talking about 3 different systemic principles, and they are all very, 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 very simple. But they are very, very, very powerful. So the first one is everybody has the equal right to belong. We're talking about scarcity, and we're talking about what we carry inside, and that scarcity keeps us away from being the person who is really good. It keeps us away from finding that purpose inside ourselves and turning it around and turning into something where our value in life is not so much about what we get, but more about what we have to give. So we try to reach in, but there is this scarcity, and so we look into ourselves and we see that things are missing. And then you look around in your family, and you might also find there are people who are missing, people who have been excluded. But we can also see that on a cultural level and on a global level that people are excluded. Not everybody has the equal right to belong. The board is full. Don't take our jobs away. Not everybody has the equal right to belong. So this is personal, and it's developed for families and individual growth process, but it's also very political. So we know that we are, from what I said, we all equal, we all similar, we all good, and everybody has the equal right to belong. Wherever someone hasn't the right to belong, something is excluded. And what we know also from a more holistic way of thinking is wherever something is excluded here, it will pop up somewhere else. So from an ecological perspective, the function of that rule, that everybody has the equal right to belong, is to ensure of the existence of the system, of any system. Because if the system doesn't have any members and no one belongs anymore, the system doesn't exist. So what we often find when we work with people in mental health, how often people are excluded. And this exclusion leaves you incomplete. And this incompleteness leads to scarcity. The first husband of my mother she doesn't talk to him anymore. The grandfather who committed suicide. The abusive husband of my ex-abusive husband. My son who is taking drugs. He's not my son anymore. So exclusions happen on multiple levels. And you can look into your own life where people are missing. And as much as you might feel that you are right to exclude them, it leaves you with a hole. I'm not going into the other 2 aspects, just simply we're not going to have the time. Which one is which?
Which one did you want?
This one. So, the second law. We call it the honoring of succession. And this law has 2 different aspects. First of all, it ensures the growth of a system. And this is particularly one which is very important when we're talking about leadership and we talk about ecology. You can see that often in situations when you're working with a business or when you were in an organization, there were people who were there before and there were people who came after. And not always is this law of the honoring of succession honored. I'll give you a simple example when you think about a plant. A plant always grows in the same way. It grows from the seed to the root, to the branch, to the leaves, to the flower. There is an order. And that order needs to be honored. Otherwise the plant can exist. But somehow we believe these laws doesn't apply to us. But they do. And when they are not honored, They affect us. So obviously this honoring of succession ensures the growth of any kind of given system. Now the interesting thing, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, because it's complex and far-reaching. Within a system, there's a priority of the older over the younger. I'll give an example. The parents have priority over the children. The parent relationship has priority over the children relationship. Why? When a man and a woman love each other, their love flows over. Where does it flow? It flows to the children. When the husband uses his son to compensate for something he doesn't get from his wife, it burdens the son. Why? Because the father puts something on the son, which is not for the son to carry, because it's something he has to sort out with his wife. It's a different generation. The older has priority over the younger. However, we're looking at subsystems, between subsystems. The younger has priority over the older. When I got married to my wife, who was Australian, we decided at some point to leave Germany. I'm the only son of my parents, and I left my parents in Germany. But I understood that the future of our system, of our subsystem, which is the younger subsystem, needs to have priority, because that makes sure that our family will survive. So you can see how sometimes these orders or these laws, they ask something of you. They ask a personal sacrifice. They humble you. Again, we are all equal. They apply to all of us. We are all affected by them in one or the other way. Okay. The third one is the equality of giving and taking, what we call reciprocity. I'm not going. We can go into again what is underneath, but I would keep it simple, because we could talk about every point a whole day. What does that mean? It means that we all are. Everything in our life is about balance. There are basically just three problems people have. Too much, too little, or the wrong kind. There is no other problem like that. You can sort any problem in one of these three categories. So, in that law, which is a law which obviously is very important in relationships, you can see how we as human beings, we feel indebted to others. I do you a favor, and you feel, I want to do him a favor. Yeah? So it's a natural process. And you can also see that in the old paradigm, that is not honored at all. Because less and less people have more and more and more. And more people have less and less and less. So how can we bring these three simple principles, how can we bring them into focus, and how can we make sure that they have a foothold and they start to have a kind of a grounding in our culture, so that eventually, maybe one day, we're going to teach our children these kind of things. And the way how we do this, we apply them to ourselves. Because in the end of the day, we all have that feeling of scarcity inside ourselves. So we ask ourselves, where is something or someone excluded in me? Where am I not at peace with someone? Where do I think that I am better, like my older sister, or my mother, or my father? That is the second one. Where do I not follow a certain natural given hierarchy, and I honor my father for what he is? You give me the gift of life, Dad. Thank you very much. You carried me in your womb, Mom. You gave birth to me and you took care of me as good as you could. I honor that. Can we leave for a moment the story behind the drama which we always put out and can go a little bit deeper? Can we look at all the people in our family which have been lost, which have never been remembered? Children who have died, children who have been stillborn, people who have been killed in wars who never were mentioned. They all belong. They belong to us, they belong to you, they belong to me. So let me finish with one little story to make this clear, how that could look like. How we bought a house. Yes, we bought a house. Wow. And I got super scared. I got really, really anxious. And somehow my grandmother popped into my mind. And as we were talking and as I was exploring and sharing this stuff with my wife and talking about my anxiety and my fear and should we do it and is this the right thing, and I became aware that my grandmother, who I never met, is the mother of my mother. She got killed. Oh, no, she didn't get killed. She lost her home twice in the Second World War, when my home city, where I've been born, in 1944, was bombed and raided twice. And she brought 4 children to the war. And almost on the day, 75 years later, I buy a house. And when I realized that, I had goosebumps all over my body. And I realized that I've never really thought of her. I realized that I never really honored her. And then I'm talking to people all the time about that stuff. But the cobbler has the worst shoes, and even as a psychologist, I have my own blind spots. So I started to engage in that process with my grandmother. And believe it or not, my anxiety was gone. It's gone. So, what does this has all to do with leadership? I believe it has a lot to do with leadership because as a leader, you need to have to deal with your own shit. What kind of leader can you be if you not have dealt with your own shit? You can only be a leader in the old paradigm, which is about scarcity and getting what I want. Because if I have it, and nobody can take it away from me. And this is obviously a choice we need to make. And my prayer and my hope is that we will make the choice which honors our goodness and which honors our equality and which honors our potential to give and to make a difference in this world. Thank you very much.